Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Summary channel. In this video, we'll give you an easy and quick rundown of another critically acclaimed film. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like if you enjoyed it.
In the real-life spy thriller movie, The Courier, a humble British businessman named Greville Wynne is enlisted in one of the biggest global conflicts in history. He establishes a secret and dangerous alliance with Soviet officer Oleg Penkovsky at the request of MI6 of the United Kingdom and CIA to provide crucial information to prevent a nuclear conflict and end the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you want to know this story, follow the video. The film begins in 1960, during the height of the arms race between the US and the USSR. Many feared that the exchange of threats between these countries would result at the end of humanity due to their weapons of mass destruction. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev delivers a provocative speech against the US, and everyone applauds. This is where we meet Oleg Penkovsky, a colonel in Soviet military intelligence. He pursues two American citizens and delivers an envelope to the care of the US Embassy. For months later, Emily Donovan, a British spy from the CIA, goes to the MI6 headquarters in London. There she meets Dickie Franks, a British intelligence service agent, in the office of his boss, Mr. Bertrand. Emily hands over Oleg's letter, which asks for help to prevent an imminent nuclear war, but he has no way of making contact. The three decide to infiltrate a businessman who is below the KGB's suspicions in Moscow to make contact with Oleg. This is where Greville Wynne comes in. He is a businessman in the electrical equipment industry who conducts a lot of business overseas. Greville receives a facade call from the trade association and meets with Emily and Dickie, who suggest good business opportunities in the Soviet Union. After a conversation full of discretion, Greville realizes that he is contacting two spies who are asking for his contribution to intelligence. Emily says it will be a great contribution to Britain and the world. The two ask Greville to do business as usual, without knowing any details to facilitate and avoid any risks. Greville receives a brooch that he must wear when he arrives in Moscow. Then he goes home and informs everyone that he will expand his business in the Soviet Union. When he arrives in Moscow, Greville stays at a hotel and then meets with the State Committee of Scientific Research to make an offer. He introduces himself to everyone and meets Oleg Penkovsky, who is the head of that committee. After Greville finishes his proposal for the Soviet industry, Oleg shows interest and invites him to lunch. The two talk about business and family and enjoy the food. Then Oleg invites Greville to see Russia. At night, they go to the Bolshoi to watch a ballet performance, and after, they go to a dark street. Oleg mentions Greville's brooch, showing that he is his contact in Moscow. Then he asks Greville to invite him to a trade delegation in London. Oleg says that his government would love it since one of its tasks is to steal technology from the West. In London, as a reward for being taken to the Bolshoi, Greville takes Oleg and his entourage to West End, where they all drink, dance, and have fun. Upon arriving at the hotel, Oleg gets rid of his group and Greville takes him to a room where Emily and Dickie are. Oleg hands them the new edition of Military Thought and says that Khrushchev is a scary man who wants a confrontation against the USA. He says he will continue to inform what the Kremlin is thinking, but asks for the assurance of help to defect his country with his family. Oleg wishes that his information not be used as a weapon, but to achieve peace. Later, he makes a recording of nuclear arsenal secrets and the destructive capability of the Soviet Union. The next day, Emily and Dickie meet with Greville and fail to convince him to be a messenger to bring the secret information from Moscow. That night, Oleg visits Wynne's house, gifts them with vodka, and brings a present for Andrew, Greville's son. During dinner, when Andrew asks Oleg why Russians hate them, he replies that this is something for the politicians on both sides. Oleg says that he and Andrew's father are just two people, but are enough to start improving the world. After dinner, Oleg convinces Greville to be the messenger by saying he would not die if caught carrying packages without knowing the content. They instructed Greville to assume that all Russians are state eyes reporting to the KGB, and that all rooms may have bugs. Dickey says that even though the embassy is not safe, it is still a place to go if there are complications. Oleg says that KGB agents lip read, so he needs to touch on sensitive issues only when he asks. Dickey says that Greville should be like a greedy capitalist, keeping Colonel Oleg Penkovsky supplied with materials for industrial production. Greville's mission is to pursue numerous contracts, always wanting to close deals and sell something like a common businessman. Cold War tensions increase and Sheila, Greville's wife, worries about her husband's trips to Russia. Oleg accompanies Greville in meetings, they have lunch together, and he hands over the envelopes with secret information. Greville feels pressure and tension from his role and behaves differently than the family was used to. Sheila notices that Greville, who has cheated on her in the past, is acting strange. She sees him as more aggressive and defensive, but he blames it on the tough time he is having at work. In Moscow, Greville meets Oleg's family and presents his daughter, Nina. Oleg's wife apologizes for not being able to invite a foreigner to dinner in her home, as they do not consider it correct. Oleg tells Greville that Moscow is showing its best side, but he does not allow visitors into the interior. Oleg dreams of a different life for Nina, one free from the government's control. He wants to escape to Montana, where he's expecting a visit from Greville's family. However, an informant reported to the KGB that there has been an increase in confidential information coming from an unusual source in the Soviet Union. In a meeting, Nikita Khrushchev decides to transform Cuba from a weakness of the USSR into a vulnerability for the Americans. Oleg begins searching through the archives for the Kremlin's plans, taking pictures of maps, documents, and military technology blueprints. Greville notices someone has tampered his desk within Moscow. An agent from the KGB visits Oleg, gifts him a cigarette, and tells him they are suspicious of Greville. Oleg promises to keep a closer eye on him, and thanks the agent for the warning. The CIA has told Emily that Oleg has supplied info about potential covers for missile bases. However, they cannot take a picture of Cuba because of the weather. Greville speaks with Emily and Dickey and reveals that his office has been searched and Oleg is in danger. Then he begs them to guarantee they will assist him in getting away. Dickey says they will do that next month when Oleg has booked a trip to London. Afterward, he releases Greville from his contributions to intelligence. Oleg falls ill in his office and goes to the emergency room, where he learns his wife is pregnant. A plane flies over Cuba under clear skies and manages to photograph missile installations on the island. Kennedy makes the information public on national television. The Ministry of Labor informs Oleg that he is no longer needed for his scheduled London trip and must remain in Moscow. Greville meets with Emily and Dickey, urging them to rescue Oleg. They say the mission is impossible, but Greville offers to go back to Moscow and warn Oleg that he's in danger. At home, Greville tells Sheila that he will close a final deal in Moscow, but she doesn't like it and sends him to sleep in a hotel. In Moscow, Oleg and Greville meet with the radio on to disrupt any eavesdropping. Emily goes to the embassy in Moscow and meets with an agent, presenting an escape route for Oleg and his family. Later, she meets with Greville, who secretly tells her that Oleg is ready, and she hands him a pack of cigarettes. Oleg receives the cigarettes from Greville when they attend a ballet performance together. Alone, Oleg learns about the escape plans hidden inside the cigarette pack. Another day, while Greville prepares to leave, Oleg's escape plan is put into action. The agent driving the getaway van is intercepted and has to flee. Emily is also pursued and must hide in the crowd until she reaches the van. Oleg goes home to retrieve his family, but KGB agents were waiting for him, and they arrested him for treason. They also arrested Emily with the getaway van, but due to her diplomatic status, they took her to the embassy and ordered her to leave the country within 24 hours. The intelligence intercepted Greville while he was on the plane and took him into custody. They installed him in terrible conditions in prison. In London, Emily and Dickey went to Mrs. Sheila Wynne to tell her the Russians had arrested her husband on charges of espionage. Sheila wept for her husband's situation and finally understood his behavior. Emily tells him that his only hope of being cleared by the Russians was for Sheila to appear in the press and deny the accusations. Greville was interrogated and claimed that he was only delivering packages without knowing their contents. He said that it was a favor for Colonel Oleg Penkovsky, just like he would do for any other client. Greville lived under poor conditions, with a poor diet and precarious hygiene. They blackmailed him with food to sign documents that would solve his case as a guilty party for espionage. They also persuaded Greville to feel anger and fear and lose hope. 6 months later, Sheila visits Greville in prison and laments about what was being done to her husband. Greville received the news that they had removed the missiles from Cuba, but the jailer prevented them from discussing politics. Sheila said that visiting Greville was a good sign, but that it would take another year or two for him to be free. Greville asked Sheila to talk about their home. Sheila talked about the garden, about Andrew, and said that if he could endure it, she would wait for him at home so they could start again. Greville said he would return to her in their home, and it was the only thing that kept him alive in prison. In London, Emily met with Dickie and Mr. Bertrand at MI6. Fearing Greville's death, they planned to exchange him for a valuable Russian spy in custody. In prison, Greville faced Oleg and had their conversation recorded by the intelligence. Oleg confessed that he gave Greville photos that helped the Americans locate the missiles in Cuba, and he reported it all to the KGB. Oleg apologized to Greville for handing him those packages without his knowledge of their contents. He said he had dreamed of making the world safer, but failed and ended up betraying his own country for nothing. Greville took Oleg's hand and forgave him, telling him that Nikita Khrushchev withdrew the missiles from Cuba because of him. The guards entered the cell to remove Greville from Oleg, who shouted, "You did it! It was because of you! You did it!" A year later, in April 1964, Greville Wynne was released in exchange for the Soviet spy Kanan Malady. He resumed his business career until he peacefully passed away in 1990. Oleg Penkovsky was executed and buried in an unmarked grave, but his family was allowed to live in Moscow. Wynne and Penkovsky smuggled around 5,000 ultra-secret documents from the USSR. Penkovsky is considered the most valuable Soviet source ever recruited by the West. After the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, they established a direct phone line between the White House and the Kremlin, safeguarding the world from a nuclear catastrophe.
So, did you like the video? We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the movie, so please leave a comment below. Also watch other of our summaries of the best movies in cinema. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.